Welcome to the European podcast. Today we'll be discussing the topic of green recovery after COVID-19 crisis. We'll be looking at the European Green Deal, which is the new EU growth strategy launched by the European Commission with the objective of transforming the European Union into a fair and sustainable society with a competitive and green economy. We'll be asking, how can we achieve a truly just and green recoveries across the European Union in the light of the crisis caused by the pandemic? Our guest will be Joanna Flisowska, Head of Climate and Energy Unit at Greenpeace Poland. Enjoy. Joanna, first of all, thank you for joining me and welcome. The European Green Deal would be a challenging agenda even in normal times. What are some of the challenges posed by the COVID-19 crisis to the Green Deal?
Okay, hello. Thank you for having me. So, first of all, I think it's very important to know that we need to look at the European Green Deal as an opportunity and as a crucial part of the solution to get out of the crisis that was caused by the COVID-19, as much as this is the opportunity to get out from the climate crisis. Also, it is really important to know that we can't afford going back to the business as usual as it was before COVID-19. We cannot afford to go back to the way it used to be, but we need to build back much better because we are not only in the COVID-related crisis, but we are also in the climate crisis, to which we actually need a strong, or rather even much stronger response. So we need to change the system in which we operate and move away from the constant growth concept and prioritize the system change, the degrowth actually. But obviously on the way to that, there are going to be some challenges, and definitely there are also some challenges ahead of the European Green Deal agenda. And I think one of those challenges is just being fooled by seeming decrease of the emissions that was taking place last year, because this is something that can fool us very quickly. So we need to know that in the process of getting out of the crisis, we need to actually decrease the emissions even farther and faster and ensure that while recovering from the economic and health crisis, we do not increase our emissions back to the previous trends, basically. But also the big risk that I see for the European Green Deal agenda is that some of the sectoral policies will be pushed farther down the line due to other priorities. Also, what we see is that many member states are now occupied with other issues like the health system, etc., etc. So the issue of the climate crisis, which might not be as tangible at the moment as other problems that we need to deal with, might risk of getting pushed farther down the line when it comes to the priorities for the member states, for the decision makers, for the society in general. So that's why we really need to have strong voices and actors that will be driving the discussion and, more importantly, the action forward, so that the European Green Deal is in the focus, is in the center of the recovery after the pandemic.
You mentioned that we need strong voices to lead the change. On that note, do you think that the European Union representatives in charge of the Green Deal rose to the challenge of the pandemic and of the crises that it caused? And if yes, how so?
Well, I mean, I think that I'm gonna be here a bit critical when it comes to assessing the actions of the EU representatives in regards to, environmental climate agenda throughout the last year when they had to deal with it, next to the pandemic. And I would have expected more from the EU representatives when it comes to moving the Green Deal forward. In my opinion, a lot of action and negotiations have been delayed throughout the last year. And even more, what is worse, I think that now we are seeing quite some risks of watering down some of the developments and policies that were already agreed. Like, for example, it looks like there are now some bad pushes regarding the green taxonomy rules. So I am very concerned about the risk of EU decision makers bending to the pressure of the fossil fuel lobby, especially fossil gas lobby that is now very intense these days, I think. But yeah, I would just hope that after this very difficult years for all of us, that actually now the European Commission, but also our leaders will really step up to the challenge and increase the efforts of implementing the Green Deal and of actually taking the climate action that is needed to combat the climate crisis.
And in light of the challenges that we've discussed, and there are many challenges, as you've mentioned, do you think that the post-COVID-19 policy response needs to follow the same strategy proposed by the Green Deal as before? Or does something need to change? I know that you've already kind of briefed on that, but what else could be done?
I think that the Green Deal is a good start. It's giving a clear direction where we are going. But the thing is that we need to go farther. We need to have a policy response that is stronger, that is more bold, and that is adequate to the climate and environmental crisis that we are in right now. So we need to start discussing how to go beyond that, how to start discussing the real system change that would move us away from the paradigm of the constant growth. And instead, we need to look how to secure actually a degrowth of our economy while ensuring the safety for the citizens, how to, in the same time, ensure better protection of the environment, how to quickly reduce the greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, and now let's have a look at the Just Transition Fund, which is the instrument of the European Green Deal. How did COVID-19 recovery program influence the Just Transition Fund? Do you think that the money will be effective in persuading coal-dependent regions to embrace renewables, especially in the COVID-19 context and the economic recovery that is ahead of us?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that when it comes to the COVID-19 influence or effects on the Just Transition Fund, then it's a bit mixed, because I think that I believe that at certain moment of the negotiations, we are discussing a much larger size of the Just Transition Fund that was agreed on in the end. But in the same time, I do acknowledge that as part of the recovery program, there are also funds that are set aside for the Just Transition Fund as well. But let's leave that as a separate point. So when it comes to the Just Transition Fund and its role in persuading the coal-dependent regions to move away from coal and to actually embrace renewables, I think the Just Transition Fund is definitely a very important symbol, and it's an incentive for the regions to think about how they see their future and to prepare just transition plans. Because for the regions to be able to use the Just Transition Fund, they are required to prepare Just Transition Fund plans to be eligible to get the funding. So this is very important that now regions have the incentive to really prepare the plans, to think about what is the vision for the region for the next decades to come, and to bring also different actors to this discussion. So these are not only plans that are prepared by the local authorities, but that are prepared in the consultations with civil society, with trade unions, with workers, with local communities, etc., etc. So from this point of view, I think that it is really important that finally we have the Just Transition Fund there, and it can, start those discussions in the regions. But what I would also like to emphasize here is that we cannot forget that there is also the whole EU budget that should be used for actions that are in line with the transformation towards carbon neutrality of the countries and of the regions as well. So, because there are a lot of voices as well, highlighting that the Just Transition Fund is not big enough, etc., etc. And true, but in the same time, the regions can use the EU funding that they get in general to fund the transformation towards carbon neutrality. So when the regions are preparing their plans on how to spend EU funds, especially the cohesion fund, they should look comprehensively and use it all in line with their plans on how to transition away from coal, but also thinking already a step ahead on how to actually transition towards climate neutral economy.
Okay, that's a very interesting point. Do you think that with the COVID-19 context and with the crises that it caused, is there a high chance for the regions and municipalities to actually prioritize the green transition and the green economy, knowing how the economy itself has been affected? Do you think there is hope for that?
Yes, I think that there is a hope. I certainly do have this hope. And I think that there are also good reasons and arguments for that. Because when we are talking about the green recovery, when we are talking about the transition towards climate neutrality, it's not only about how to end things like end burning coal, how to decrease the emissions. This is also about new investments. It's also about new jobs, new workplaces. It's about new research that can be done, etc., etc. So this is all part of the solution, how to get out of this crisis that we are dealing with now, that is related to the COVID and to the economic crisis that certainly is also there in many regions. The investment towards renewables, investments towards energy efficiency, energy savings. These are all answers to this crisis that we are in, both from the economic point of view, but also from the climate point of view.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. Let's go further and look at the reconstruction fund. The European Union's response to the corona crisis is the reconstruction fund. Over 23 billion euros in subsidies and over 34 billion euros in loans are to go to Poland from this source. And in order to use these funds, each state must prepare its own national recovery plan. So, what do you think about the current state of the recovery plan? Is it transparent enough? Is it efficient enough? And which sectors of the economy will receive most help?
So, unfortunately, my answer in very short to your questions would be no. So, in Poland, so far, work on the national recovery plan was not transparent at all. It is very intransparent. So far, there is no public draft of the plan that would be available to look at. There are no details about what is in this governmental plan, because, I mean, we know that the government is working on something, but we don't know what's in it, what are the priorities, what are the criteria. It is also actually unclear who is really working on it, like what ministries are working on it, in what kind of working groups, etc., etc. And obviously that means that there is no proper civil society involvement right now in the process as well. So unfortunately, what we can judge is only the very vague communication from the government that is very limited. So at the moment, I would say that national recovery plan for Poland does not look very hopeful to lead to the truly green recovery. So I am afraid that it will be another lost opportunity for Poland.
Okay, thank you. Finally, do you think that the urgency of the pandemic has taught us any lessons on the importance of tackling climate change? I know it's a big question, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that there are some lessons that we can take out from the last year. I think what it showed us is that when we actually feel the urgency, we can take bold, decisive actions. We can find funds that we didn't know there are, that you know that they exist, that we didn't know that could be fun. We can change our habits. We can change the way that we operate. So basically, the pandemic showed us that the change is possible when we actually need the urgency, when we are forced to change. It also showed us how the environmental crisis is so linked with health, with economics, etc. Because we need to also remember that part of the reason we have pandemic, or that we are in a risk of having to deal with even new and other pandemics in the future, is also because of the environmental crisis that we are in now. It's because of the loss of biodiversity that we are seeing right now all around the world. So this shows us that we cannot focus all our efforts only on one issue at the time. We need to work comprehensively on tackling all of the crises, all of the issues that we are dealing with. And I would also hope that this pandemic showed us that the prevention is better, so that we will not wait until the actual climate catastrophe happens before we realize that we need to act. So I'm just really hoping that this last year will actually fuel more urgency into the climate action that we've seen before.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for your insights. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. This was the European Podcast. You can access more episodes on our website, Spotify, and SoundCloud. The project was co-financed by the Governments of Czechia, Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia through Visegrad Grants from International Visegrad Fund. The mission of the fund is to advance ideas for sustainable regional cooperation in Central Europe.